So next up is Saul Berman, or Dr. Saul Berman. He's going to talk to us about our exciting IBM-Apple partnership, really about mobile solutions for the enterprise, cloud delivered. Dr. Berman is the Vice President and Chief Strategist for our Global Business Services. He's a renowned author and a thought leader within IBM. Saul, please join us at the stage.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Good to see you again, my friend.
Good to see you. Thank you. So I hope you understood what went on there for the last 15 minutes. My head is spinning. So in case you haven't figured out, I'm a futurologist, not a technologist. So you'll pardon me if I speak in layman's English. And I don't know about you, but if I want to get the best ideas for the future, I go talk to about a 7 or an 8-year-old. I know some of you talked, or Angel talked about the different generations. I'll just tell one quick story, and then we'll get into this, and I'll try to stay within my 29 minutes and 16 seconds. That recently, one of our marketing executives was saying that in her household, her teenager was getting very frustrated with an app on the device and couldn't get it to shut down. So the teenager comes in the room, asks the mother who works for IBM, maybe you know, how do I get this to shut down? It's stuck at the moment. And they both get frustrated. They can't shut it down. The 7 or 8-year-old comes in the room and says, "What's your problem?" And they explain they can't shut this app down and how frustrated they are. The 7 or 8-year-old pushes the button and says, "Siri, please close the app." Siri closed the app down. The little kid walks out of the room and says, "Why do you adults have such problems with this stuff?" So, those of you out there who are in this industry and are closer to my age than their age, we've got some challenges. So part of my job in life is to be out there looking at those challenges, to predict the things people don't want to hear, in most cases, before they hear them. So some of my friends from the entertainment industry will know that HBO is about to let you buy, God forbid, streaming video of HBO without having a cable subscription. Call it the future, call it a la carte. I've been talking about that since 2005. I've been talking about cloud, which is why we're here today, since about 2010. We're going to talk about the importance of cloud to digital reinvention. We're going to talk about this concept of the individual enterprise. You heard John Iwata talk a little bit about this before, and we've written a white paper on this I'll talk about. And then we're going to talk about the Apple and IBM opportunity where we're working together. We're just about to release some of these apps. I'm going to give you a quick preview of some of the screenshots at some of them. But let me start with asking the question, as I just posed, who are you watching? Are you prepared for the future? This concept that the generations are changing. And so we have this thing at IBM called the Institute for Business Value. Anybody have the IBV app on your devices? If you haven't, other than the IBMers, you probably should get a copy. This is where all our thought leadership goes, and it's free. I wrote a book called Not for Free. This is actually for free, and we invest tens of millions of dollars a year in this content, and it's award-winning, so I recommend it to you. This is a paper I wrote that's out there about 4 or 5 years ago called The Power of a Cloud. And again, I don't understand a lot about technology, but I can tell you cloud changes everything. I told the world that 5 years ago. It creates all kinds of opportunities for new business models. It's not just about cost efficiency. It's about doing things that you couldn't do previously. And I'm going to show you some examples of that in the Apple case. In the consumer space, the question and a lot of what we're about in the Apple-IBM relationship is, why haven't these things happened in the enterprise space? Why do I still have to deal with screens from SAP that drive me crazy when I go into a database in the enterprise space? What are we doing about those kinds of things? And that's part of the problem we want to face and take advantage of. But we're saying when cloud first came along, we looked at what businesses were doing it, and most people were using it to tweak their existing business. They're the, if you will, the optimizers. And then there were some people who were being more innovative. But the real opportunity or the real threat to many of your traditional businesses came from the disruptors. the people who are willing to start from scratch, the people willing to create a totally different business model, the people like my cable company legacy friends didn't have the legacy assets that they were trying to protect as long as possible. So we've been talking for a number of years about that. We've been talking about the shift from digital transformation, which is what everybody talked about 3-4 years ago. Then we started talking about you have to go beyond digitizing your assets. One of my favorite stories, about a year and a half ago, believe it or not, I go to a newspaper publisher in Europe, and they're thrilled to death that they just digitized their newspaper. And I don't know about you, but what's a newspaper? I've been saying that since about 2000. You know, somebody came up to me in a meeting like this, said, I know you weren't talking about newspapers, but what's the future of a newspaper? I didn't know it was the president of the largest newspaper chain in that country. And I said, what's a newspaper? I mean, do your children read a newspaper? Do they know what a newspaper is? At the same time, you're more informed about the news than ever. So we consume more news. Part of what I wrote about before in the music industry, we listen to more music than we ever did. But the music industry, as we know it, is worth about half of what it used to be. So you got to not only watch what's happening in the new business models and where things are going, but it's not just where the eyeballs are going, it's where's the money going. We're all in business still to make money. The question is, where is the money going? And that's what you have to watch with some of these new platforms. And so we're saying in the most recent paper or two that you have to digitally reinvent your business. It's not about taking your business and digitizing. It's about reinventing what business you're in, thinking out of the box, thinking creatively. And we are now talking about, in the mobile space, this thing called the individual enterprise. I'll touch on some of these concepts briefly. They're all out there on the IBM site. They're all available to you. And I'll get you to the apps here in a couple minutes, which I'm sure you're all interested in. But digital technologies are changing consumer expectations. As someone probably said earlier in the day, whatever's the last experience I had is the experience I expect from everybody. So let me use a couple examples here. How many of you fly on an airline regularly? Most of you, I suspect. Okay. So if one airline allows you to see the seat map when you book your ticket, why doesn't another airline? And once one airline's done it and allows me to pick my meal in advance, allows me to pick my seat in advance, I get pretty frustrated with the airline that doesn't do that. What happens if I get on the plane and we get up in the air and the pilot gets on and says, oh, sorry, we're going to be a little late. We had to run around that thunderstorm, or we had an air traffic delay. And everybody starts looking at their watch, and everybody starts looking at their tickets, particularly those of us who have tech connections if you live in a place like Orange County, and they say, oh no, I'm going to miss my connection. So what happens for the next hour or two when you're on the plane and you know you're going to miss your connection? You're getting nervous. You're pressuring the crew to do something about it, which they can't do in most cases. They're probably hiding in the kitchen because they don't want to deal with all that. And they keep playing a message that says when you land, somebody will be there, call them. What if we could solve that problem? What about if we could do something different? Well, we're going to show you more and more that with social media, mobile revolution, the power of analytics, and cloud enablement, you can do things about things like this. But what's important is we're early on. Remember, most of you are old enough to remember back to the internet, and you first got your first internet connection in 1994 or thereabout, and tried Mosaic or AOL. Remember those days? What I had, I thought 2.6 megabyte kilobytes was an average speed. God help me. But the world changed. It went on from there. Those things accelerated. There was an exponential curve. In 1999, everybody had these great ideas. I shut most of them down. They weren't ready for prime time. The infrastructure wasn't there to support it. But as these things get built, and as everybody's getting these sensors and these data, and it's being captured, the things that change in business only accelerate. So the point of this slide is saying these social, mobile, analytics, and cloud things are happening, but we're very early on in the life cycle. We're very early on in what they can do. Looking into the future, we think they're going to drive to fragmentation of the value chain. They're going to lead to convergence of industries. You're going to cooperate and compete at the same time, co-opetition, and ecosystems where the individual play will emerge. So part of what happens here is these trends move on. How many of you have a fitness band on today? Okay. There's some new ones out just announced today that do even more things, and they're going to do more things in the future. But imagine a day in the future where this is taking all your vital signs and your blood pressure and your heart rate, which as of today can do your heart rate, I believe, in the new version, and it's sending it to Dr. Watson. You've all heard of Dr. Watson, the guy who played Jeopardy. You heard that story from Angel and others earlier. And Dr. Watson has the whole history and has your whole medical history and has every article that's ever been published on medicine. And Dr. Watson sends a note to my doctor, my personal doctor, and it says to him, well, I think Saul's coming down with something. He's got a 20% chance he's coming down with this. He's got a 30% chance he's coming down with this, and a 25% chance he's coming down with this. And I recommend this treatment. And the doctor sends a signal back to my device, because my body is now a node, if you will, on the Internet of Things. So I'm part of the Internet of Things as a physical person with wearables, and it's integrating the data. And the doctor sends a signal back here that says, Saul, it's time to go to bed. The alarm goes off. You've got to get more sleep. You're not feeling well. And by the way, you ought to take some antibiotics, and we'll just inject that right in your skin here. You laugh, but it's coming. Mark my words. So the human body, as I say, gets integrated. The digital and physical get integrated in this Internet of Things. Everything becomes orchestrated, symbiotic, contextual, and cognitive. The last best experience, as I told you, becomes the minimum experience for everybody. So where do you design your business in the future? How do you work on your business strategy? You go talk to everybody in your IT department. So might be one input. But if you're the CEO of a company, from our last C-suite study, they told us increasingly they go and talk to their customers, even more so than the board of directors, more so than the corporate strategy function. That's kind of bad for people like me who grew up in the strategy function. But increasingly, the customer matters. Increasingly, the customer's a key participant in our strategy and the strategy for the future. It's all about humanizing it. It's all about bringing the digital and physical together. It's bringing it together in augmented reality. It's bringing it together in some of the ways I've talked about, and lots of other ways in the future. But it's about business innovation. Remember, how many of the Fortune 500 companies, I forget the statistic, were here 20 years ago? The numbers of companies turning over is turning over quicker and quicker, and you've got to be one of the business innovators. So at IBM, I'm part of what we call the experience, IBM iX interactive experience practice, and part of what we think is it's about bringing some of the skills from a creative direction to think out of the box and create new concepts and interact with the customer together with traditional consultancy skills and the power to integrate them in the whole system. So you might think of the Apple-IBM relationship, which I'll get to here in a second. We're bringing the design skills of Apple to the business, if you will, system and knowledge and industry knowledge skills that IBM has. We think they're both part of this. Some of the speakers before talked about this concept of the individual enterprise, moving from systems of record to systems of insight, moving from mainframes and desktops to tablets, phones, wearables, phablets, whatever you got. How many people in the audience have an iOS device? How many people do not? I'll have to have a discussion with you. How many people have iOS devices in your company as part of your company infrastructure? How many do not? Okay. Apple says they're in 98% of the companies, so I'm just testing some of that sample out here. But the question is, what do you do with those things, and how do you use them in the future? And in the individual enterprise, We're saying you have to attack real business problems and create business value. You have to bring the power of analytics together with the unique features and capabilities of mobile. And what this is about is unleashing your employees. Most underutilized asset in your company, your employees. They've learned to do all these new things in the consumer space, and what do you do with them when they come to work? You lock them down. You don't give them the same capabilities in most cases that they have and they're beginning to learn in the consumer space. You don't give them the power to treat your customers and your business partners the way we want them to and the way they potentially could. So let's talk about how do you do that. Now, part of why you haven't done that, and you can tell me I'm wrong, is security, security, security. It's about some of these other issues of connectivity, resiliency, you know, how do you back up, how do you restore, how do you integrate, how do you make sure the data doesn't leave the country. All these are issues that we believe are solvable and can be solved, but we understand the reluctance. But that's part of why Apple and IBM came together, because we believe, and I was one of the people who worked since early this year putting this deal together, we believe that our businesses don't really overlap. We bring very complementary skills, and we believe those are the skills the enterprise needs to unleash the power that's been unleashed in the consumer market. So let's talk about the consumer market. Anybody remember the weather girl or guy? 6:10, 7:10 in the evening, if you wanted to see the weather, you turned on your television set. Anybody still do that? No. You know, you pull out your app and you look at the weather whenever you want to look at it. Oh, when you drove down here, you know, what would you do in the past? You get a rental car, you get a map. I was presenting this to some people from Avis and Budget yesterday in New York. It's like, how many maps do you give out these days? Okay, what happens now? You get an app, you use Google Maps, you use Waze, you use something that's going to get you there. What about when you hear a song on the radio and you want to get a copy of that song? Remember doing that? Gee, I can't figure out the name of that song. What am I going to do? Now you go to Shazam, and you get an app to help you do that. Favorite one is, what do you want to do when you got a taxi? You want a taxi back to the airport if you flew in? In the old days, you would have got out the yellow pages. And, you know, these things are all in my lifetime. They're not that long ago, and most of yours. And you would have called a taxi. Now what do? You don't even go out in the street and hail a taxi. You push a button and Uber shows up. So if we have all these great improvements in the consumer space, why don't we have all these great improvements in the enterprise space? So that's what it's about. It's about redefining mobility. It's about getting beyond basic communication with these devices in the enterprise. Everybody's using them, 98, 95% of the companies, but you're using them mainly for email, using them for scheduling and calendaring, maybe some productivity, but you're not using them in a major way to transform your business. You're not transforming your processes as those consumer processes were transformed. So can we do that? We believe so. We believe we can put the collective knowledge and power of the entire enterprise at every employee's fingertips. So one example I got in here, let me give you, everybody have cable or satellite in your house? You're not, anybody in my 5%, 10% that's already cut the cord to both of those? Okay, we got one or two. So if you got cable or satellite, let's take cable, what happens when it doesn't work? They send somebody out usually. Do they usually get it fixed the first time? Not really. Usually they show up late. Or they give me an 8-hour window. They'll show up sometime between these 8 hours, which I'm sure they can make that most of the time. And they don't have the right part. They don't have the right skill. Well, what about if they had the power of the whole company with them? What about if they knew all that before they got there? What about if they could transform that process? Would you be happy? Yes. What about on the airline, when your flight's delayed, if the stewardess walks down the aisle to you and says, Mr. Gold or Silver status member of my frequent flyer program, or Mrs., we're going to be late. I'm sorry to tell you that, but here are the 2 alternative flights. Which one would you like me to book you on? And let me get you your seat. Let me move your bags if you checked your bags. And when you land, just turn on your phone and your boarding pass will be there. Would you feel a lot better about that? You bet you would. And guess what? The airline would save a lot of money and have a lot more loyal customers. Because now I've got productive assets walking up and down that aisle as opposed to sitting in the galley. And I don't need as many productive assets to deal with the unhappy, frustrated, screaming customers when they get off the plane. So how do I make all this happen? I bring together analytics and analytical insight, the devices that are there and can do this today, and linking them into the systems of record, into the enterprise systems. So what do I want to do in these apps that we're going to create 150 of in the next year, year and a half? I want to solve an industry pain point. So another one, in the airline business, and this one's actually out there with an airline already, fuel cost. Now, fuel costs have gone down this week. I don't know because of the election or why, but fuel costs are down. But fuel costs have been 20% or more, an increasing percentage of the airline cost. In fact, for most airlines, it was recently the #1 cost was fuel cost. Okay, so anybody know who's the largest user of dot matrix printers in the world? Airlines. So the pilot gets on the plane with all these dot matrix printouts and figures out how much fuel to put on the plane. Gets out his handy calculator usually. You think that optimizes the amount of fuel being put on the plane? So he says, oh, I'm going to go down this runway, and oh, I might have a delay en route, and oh, I might have to circle before I land, and oh, I better put a little more on. And the more I put on takes more fuel to carry the extra fuel I put on just in case. And guess what? The airlines, waste a lot of fuel. What if he could plug into all the historical data, and we could tell him with what probability he won't have a problem given all the weather factors, given all the routing factors, given all the delays on the other end, and he doesn't need any dot matrix printouts to do that. So we're going to give him an app that says there's a 99.7% chance that you get there if you put this much fuel on. If you want to allow for another delay or you want to allow for this, you can move this slider on your device and we'll tell you how much fuel to put on. Great app, saving one airline 20% of its fuel costs already. Of course, some of my partners said I went home and showed that to my wife and now she won't fly that airline. So you can't win them all. But it is, we're in business, remember. It's powered by analytics and, as you all know, the cost of that last incremental little bit of the exponential curve is very expensive. It's made for mobile. It takes advantage of features that you couldn't do without mobile. So if I come out to your house and I'm the insurance, some of the pain points. I'm an insurance agent. I come to your house. I'm going to sell you life insurance. You're all excited. You're ready to buy. What happens? Oh, you got to fill in these forms and get your medical records. And when you send them all in, I'll send them the adjusters, and then I'll get back to you with a rate. And by then, a month later, well, maybe you've shopped 3 other places. Maybe you've lost interest. What about if I could, using the features of the phone, scan all those things in right there while I'm with you? What about if you could sign, please, on the dotted line while I'm there? What if I'm in the insurance claim adjuster and I don't want you to file suit, I want to settle your claim? I'm here. I'm going to settle it on the spot. I take the pictures. I got my adjusters on the line and we've solved it. Here's how much we're ready to give you. Sign here, you'll accept it. Fine. The money's in your account right now. Lots of business issues can be solved with the power of mobile devices and empowering your employees. That employee in the retail store that Angel talked about, oh, you're in here showrooming again. So I go over to you and you say, I can't find my size. Well, what about if I could say to you, look, I know you don't have it here, but we have it in the store down the street. Just sign here and I'll send it to you, or we'll deliver it to you, or you can pick it up, whatever you'd prefer. Oh, well, I found it at a better price online. Well, here I've got the authorization right here on my tablet while I'm talking to you. We'll meet that price and close this sale now. There are lots of things that can be done to empower your employees. What about that cable operator? You've got a problem with your widget, and he doesn't know about widgets. Well, he gets the widget guy on the phone. He shows them a video picture from his camera of what the problem is he's trying to deal with and why he's stuck, and he can get the technical expert to give him the advice real time while he's there to solve your problem. So look at all the features, and we're working with clients on workshops as we speak about this now. Happy to do it with your company, where we come out there and we say, here are all the features. Here are all your business problems. Have you thought about putting these two things together? And guess what? We got a new thing as of last week we can add into the equation that Angel talked about a little bit too, which is Twitter. I mean, most companies go out there and they say, I'm looking at my company hashtag. I'm looking at when they say at my company. How many of you are looking at when they don't do a hashtag or an A symbol about your company? Most of you are not. There's a wealth of data out there. You can use it for product development. You can use it to improve your supply chain. So not only are we going to create these mobile apps, but we're going to bring the data that Twitter will provide increasingly into the capabilities of these apps. We've got a wave one of apps coming to market in the next week or two, starting with some of the ones I've talked about in banking and financial services, retail, insurance, telecommunications, government, and travel and transportation. We'll go beyond that, as I say, very quickly. I talked to you a little bit about the retail in-store associate. Sure, you can do some of these things about inventory today, but you're doing them at the register. Now you can do them with a tablet or an iPhone that you go directly to the customer. You not only know what your stock is, where the stock is, you know if that customer's opted in, what they've bought before, you know what they like, you can add to that sale, you can do complementary sales, as well as find what it is they're looking for. The mobile sales agent in insurance. I know everything about the customers I'm going to see. I know what the status is. I know what the policies are. I can simulate different experiences with them real time on the spot. Telco, mobile field services, any repair service. I know where all my trucks are. I can change the schedule during the course of the day. I know what equipment they have. I've prepared them for that. And I can video in increasingly these experts to help me. Travel and transportation. This is the airline pilot, the idea that I know your flight's delayed and I can on the plane rebook your luggage if you were foolish enough to check it, and get them all to you at the same time in the same place. The second wave we're going to go down is energy and utilities, healthcare, life sciences, chemicals, and petroleum, education, and consumer packaged goods. So we'll be addressing those, or whatever industry you're in, over the next next year or so. We're looking and developing, if you will, initial client, foundation client relationships in each of these industries. What we're doing is we're developing, if you will, prototype apps that are on average about 70%, if you will, prepared. And then we're coming out and working with you or whomever our clients are to customize them and put their own brand, their own image, their own characteristics into it, and then tie it into their systems of record. So the deal is first about these solutions and transforming your business, but the deal with Apple also includes IBM providing the software, middleware platform that provides the security and the other requirements of the enterprise to make these things work, taking a full functionality of the devices into enabling you to do that. So, the device has got GPS. If you can have the data, but you can't have it when you go from Germany to France, that's a solvable problem. A lot of these problems are solvable, and we're going to make them solvable for iOS. The other thing we're going to do is make the devices available to you. You want to buy them from whoever you buy them from normally, that's fine. We don't care. If you want, we'll lease them to you. We'll provide the management services around them, and the cost per month will end up over the life of the asset being about the same as you would pay to buy the device itself retail. And finally, we're going to work with Apple Care to provide Apple Care for the enterprise, which I believe they've just about announced or recently announced or will any day, where Apple will provide custom pricing and specific services for the enterprise as opposed to what you had to buy in the past, which was basically the consumer package. Apple will provide the phone support, IBM will provide the on-site support, and IBM will add other customized services if your enterprise so desires on top of that. So that's Apple and IBM. We've talked about cloud as the basis of all this, as part of social mobile analytics and cloud. We've talked about digital reinvention. It's not about tweaking your business. We talked about making it more individual. And we talked about what Apple and IBM are going to do together. And if you want to read more of the crazy things I say, you can go follow me or read my book. It's not for free, so I don't have copies to give out. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer a question or two.